Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. Today we are going to see class 12 biology chapter 6 evolution. In that we are going to see origin of life. So today we are going to start a very interesting topic from evolution. So now when you hear the word evolution, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Maybe you think about how humans evolved or how different organisms came into existence. But before we talk about evolution, we have to understand something very basic. How did life begin? To understand how different life forms evolved over millions of years, first we need to know a little bit about the origin of life. And actually, for that, we have to go even further back. So we need to understand how the universe originated and how the earth was formed and how the condition on earth slowly became suitable for life. So basically today let's do this with the help of storyline. Yeah. So today's story, it starts with the universe, then we come to the earth, and finally we reach the origin of life. So it's really a fascinating story. So let's start. Okay, let me ask you something. When you look at the stars at night, do you think you are seeing the stars exactly they are now? No, right? So this is something very interesting. The light from a star, it takes a very long time to reach us. For example, if a star is very far away, the light that we are seeing today may have started its journey millions of years ago. That is why the distance between the stars is measured in light years. So, in a way, when we look at the stars, we are actually looking into the past. So it's almost like the universe has given us a time machine, we can say. But when you look at these things around us, a tree, a book, a person, yeah, we see them almost in the present because the light reaches our eyes very quickly. So remember this simple idea. The farther away we look into space, the further back in time we are looking. So now let's go back. Yeah, we'll start with this topic. So our universe is extremely old. It is about 13.8 billion years old. How much? 13.8 billion years old. So how did this huge universe come into existence? So there comes the Big Bang theory. Big Bang theory. So it is one of the theories that explains the origin of universe. Yes, it explains the origin of universe. So according to this theory, the universe began with a huge explosion-like event. Huge explosion-like event. So after that, the universe started expanding, and then as the universe expanded, it gradually became cooler, and later elements like hydrogen, helium, yes, were formed. And these gases, they started coming together under the influence of gravity, and eventually galaxies were also formed. And inside these galaxies, we have stars and huge clouds of gas and dust. So if you want to remember the sequence, is very simple. First Big Bang, then it expanded, then cooling, hydrogen and helium, galaxies and star. So from here, we let's move towards the galaxy. So our galaxy is called the Milky Way galaxy, right? And somewhere inside this huge galaxy, we have our solar system. And in this solar system, we have our Earth, our precious Earth. So Earth was formed approximately 4.5 billion years ago. But please don't imagine the Earth as a beautiful blue planet we see today, okay? The early Earth was completely different. It was extremely hot. How it was? It was extremely hot, and the atmosphere was also very different from what we have today. And there was no oxygen-rich atmosphere like the one we breathe today. So the Earth had to go through a lot of changes before it became suitable for life. And that brings us to the next one. So here, when we talk about the early Earth, so what was the early Earth like? Yeah. So the early Earth was extremely hot because it was formed from a molten mass. It was formed from a molten mass, and various gases were released from this hot material, and then atmosphere contained gases like water vapor, yes, methane, carbon dioxide, and ammonia. And now the condition were very different from today's earth. Yeah, the conditions were very different. Now we don't have conditions like that. The sun's ultraviolet rays, it also played an important role. So let's stick to our NCERT book. So UV radiation caused water molecules to break down and lighter hydrogen escaped into the space. So what happened? The UV rays, it broke the water molecules, and what happened? The lighter hydrogen escaped into the space. And over time, chemical changes took place and the ozone layer was also formed. So this ozone layer was very important because it helped to protect the earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation. So slowly the earth was changing. Yes, it was becoming cooler and more suitable for the development of the life. Then another important thing came into existence. So as the earth started cooling, the water vapor present in the atmosphere, it began to condense. It began to condense. And what happens when water vapor condenses? You know, right? Yes, it comes down as the rain. So there was probably a lot of rainfall over a very long period. And then the water collected in the low-lying areas of the earth. And gradually the oceans were formed. And these oceans, they become very important because the earliest forms of life were developed in a water environment. And life appeared around 4 billion years ago. Yes, life appeared 4 billion years ago. So, which was approximately 500 million years after the formation of the earth. So, now we have, see, earth is formed and earth cooled, rainfall occurred and oceans were formed and conditions became suitable for the life. But still, we have one big question. Where did the first life come from? So let's see what different ideas scientists have suggested. Yes, early ideas on the origin of life. So one interesting idea is called Panspermia. So some scientists have suggested that life may have come to Earth from outer space. The early Greek thinkers, they also had ideas about units of life, and sometimes described as spores. They are being transferred from one planet to another, one planet to another. So this idea is called as Panspermia. So now this is an interesting possibility, but there is still a big question. If life came from somewhere else in space, then where did life originally come from? Yes. So panspermia, it does not completely solve the mystery of the origin of life. So what it suggests? It simply suggests that life may have reached Earth from somewhere else. So now let's look at the another old idea. Another one is the spontaneous generation. So for a very long time, people believed in something called the theory of spontaneous generation. And what is this about? So according to this old idea, living organisms could appear directly from non-living or decaying materials. So for example, people believed that life could arise from things like mud, straw or decaying matter. But later, scientists started questioning this idea. And one scientist who played a very important role in disproving spontaneous generation was Louis Pasteur. So let's see what he did. So let's see this Louis Pasteur experiment. So Pasteur wanted to answer a simple question. What was his question? Can microorganisms appear on their own or do they come from pre-existing life? So in order to answer this, he performed experiment using sterilized flask. You can able to see the sterilized flask, this one. So when the material was properly sterilized and protected from contamination, no new organisms appeared. But when it was exposed to air, microorganisms appeared. So this shows that the microorganisms did not simply appear from nowhere. So from where they came from pre-existing microorganisms which were present in the environment. So Pasteur's work helped to establish the important idea that life comes from pre-existing life. And because of this, the theory of spontaneous generation, it was rejected. But students, there is a very one very important point is here. See, Pasteur explained the new life comes from existing life, but he did not explain how the very first life appeared on earth. Yes, can you understand what he explained? He said that new life comes from existing life, but he did not explain how the very first life appeared on Earth. And that's the big question we still need to answer. So let's think about it. So if life comes from pre-existing life, then what about the very first life then? Yes, there was no organism before the first organism. So how did it appear? Yes, let's see that. So let's see what about the very first life and how did it appear. So this question led scientists to another explanation. Scientists like Oparin from Russia and Haldane from England, they proposed an interesting idea. So they suggested the first life forms could have developed gradually from non-living organic molecules. So what they said, first life forms could have developed gradually from non-living organic molecules. And they believed that before life appeared, there was a stage called chemical evolution. So let's understand this. What is this chemical evolution? See, chemical evolution basically means the gradual formation of organic molecules from inorganic substances. Nothing but formation of organic molecules from inorganic substances under the conditions that existed on early Earth. So some conditions were there no in the early Earth. Yes. So according to Oparin and Haldane idea, life didn't suddenly appear fully formed. So instead it may have happened through a series of gradual chemical changes. And then first, simple substances were present. Then organic molecules were formed, and these organic molecules, they became more complex. And eventually this process may have led to the earliest forms of life. So this was the basic idea. That is, the simple inorganic substances was present, and from it organic molecules came. Then it converted into complex molecules and the early life originated. Again, we have a question. What were the conditions like on early Earth? Yes. So conditions, if you see here, conditions on early Earth. So again, according to Oparin and Haldane, the early Earth had very different conditions. It was extremely hot. Yes. And there were volcanic activities and storms. And also the atmosphere contained gases like methane, ammonia, hydrogen and water vapor. And these conditions were very different from our present atmosphere. So they suggested that these conditions could have provided the right environment for chemical reactions to take place. So these were the conditions, yes. And over a very long period, these reactions could have produced different organic molecules. But still, this was and all just a hypothesis, yeah. So scientists, they wanted to test whether organic molecules could actually form under such conditions, and this is where Miller experiment became very important. Yeah, can you see the Miller experiment? So Miller experiment in 1953, yes, an American scientist S.L. Miller, American scientist S.L. Miller, he performed a very famous experiment. So Miller wanted to recreate conditions similar to those believed to exist on the early Earth. You saw, we saw the conditions on the early Earth now. So same conditions, yes. So so he took gases such as what gases we saw already, methane, hydrogen, ammonia, yes, along with the water vapor. You can able to see this is the Miller experiment. So these are the gases, yes, methane, hydrogen, yes, ammonia, and along with the water vapor. He then passed the electric sparks. So these are the electric sparks through the setup. So why he used this electric sparks? See, this electric spark, it stimulates the energy that would have been provided by lightning on early Earth. Lightning, you know what is lightning? Thunder, lightning and all, yeah? So this electric spark, yeah, is used to stimulate the energy that could have been provided by lightning on early Earth. So after the running the experiment, Miller observed the formation of amino acid. He saw the formation of the amino acid. And then these amino acids, they are, you know very well that they are building blocks of proteins. Yes. So this experiment it showed that under suitable conditions, organic molecules could be formed from simpler inorganic substances. And later, similar experiments were also like produced compounds such as sugar, nitrogen, bases, and pigments and fats. So Miller's experiment, it provided important experimental support for the concept of chemical evolution. Yes, they provided important experimental support for the concept of chemical evolution. That is why this experiment is so important for your examination. Yes, please prepare well. This experiment is so important. So always remember Oparin and Haldane. Yeah, they proposed this one. Yes, and then Miller experimentally tested the possibility. And then let's see, from molecules to life. So from molecules to the first cells. So now we have reached a very interesting stage. See, scientists had evidence that organic molecules could be formed. But there is still another question. How did these organic molecules become the first living organism? Anyone know? See, honestly, we don't have a complete answer to this question. But the exact process of how the first self-replicating and the living system developed is still not fully understood. We don't know. Let's stick on to our NCERT book. So the first non-cellular form of life, it appeared 3 billion years ago, approximately 3 billion years ago. And these may have involved large molecules such as RNA, protein, polysaccharides. And over time, these molecules may have become organized into structures, yes, capable of reproducing themselves. Structures capable of reproducing themselves, and that could have been a very important step towards the origin of life. Next one is the first cellular life. First cellular life. So this step is one step further. So eventually, the first cellular form life appeared here. So according to our book, so these appeared around 2 billion years ago, or we can say approximately 2000 million years ago. So these early organisms were they are probably single-celled. How they are? Single-celled. And one important point is the earliest life forms lived in a water environment. So if you look at the whole story, we can imagine a gradual journey. First, we had simple inorganic substances. Yes. Then organic molecules formed. Then these molecules, they become complex, more complex. And then came the earliest non-cellular forms. And then the first cellular organisms appeared. So from these early life forms, evolution continued for millions and millions of years. And finally, we have the enormous biodiversity. Yes, we have the enormous biodiversity that we see around us today. Okay, so let's put the whole story together for you. Yes, the universe, how it originated at 13.8 billion years ago. Then galaxies and stars formed. Our Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago. And the early Earth was, how it was, extremely hot. Then it cooled. Water vapor condensed and rainfall occurred and oceans were formed. Then what happened? Then over a long period, chemical evolution resulted in the formation of organic molecules. And then these molecules gradually became more complex. Yeah, the first non-cellular forms of life appeared then. Then first cellular organisms developed, and from there evolution continued. So over billions of years, life diversified into huge variety of organisms we see today. Yes, can you understand this whole story, children? Yeah. So let's have a quick revision. So universe we know is approximately 13.8 billion years old, and Earth was formed approximately 4.5 billion years ago, and then life appeared around 4 billion years ago. So panspermia is nothing but the idea that life may have come from outer space, and spontaneous generation is nothing an old idea that would arise from decaying matter, and this was disproved. And Louis Pasteur showed that microorganisms come from pre-existing life and disproved spontaneous generation. And then Oparin and Haldane, yeah, they proposed the idea of chemical evolution. And S.L. Miller, right? He performed the famous 1953 experiment, and he obtained amino acids under stimulated early earth conditions. Those conditions, everything we know very well. And finally, The earliest forms of life were probably simple single-celled organisms living in water. So we have come to the conclusion part. Watch the full video. Don't skip it, children. So do you find the story format good for you and easy to understand? Comment in the comment box. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. I'll reply back immediately. So we have come to the conclusion part of this video. Thank you. We'll see you in the next session. Thank you.